Hello guys, Tom Yone here from Extra Tech with Tom, and welcome to my tutorial on version control. In this tutorial, we'll be discussing version control, and we'll talk about how we can push our code to a cloud server where our code can be saved, and how we can, while we're working on our code on our local server, it's not going to affect the original code. And if eventually we've messed up things on our computer, we know that we still have original version of our code. Okay, so version control is a very important part of programming. So as a programmer, you know how you painstakingly written your code, and perhaps you discover that you've made some changes that are not really the way you expected them, and maybe you really want to get your code revised back to the original code. With version control, you know that your code is safe, because whatsoever changes you make on your local server stays on your local server, and the original code that you've already saved on the cloud is still there, unless you've already pushed it to the server. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to discuss how you can save your code on the server, how you can create a repository, and the softwares we're going to be using. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. All right, so we are going to be using few tools, and the very first tool we're going to use is a terminal, and the terminal we'll be using for this class, for this lesson, is the Git Bash Terminal. Okay, and the powerful version control tool we're going to be using is Git. There are a lot of version control software, but Git is the very popular one, and that's the one we're going to be using. Okay, and the version control server we're going to be using is going to be GitHub. We have other version control servers or version control system like the Bitbucket. Okay, Bitbucket is also a very nice version control server. We have Apache Subversion, we have Monotone, we have Dash. These are all beautiful version control tools, but we are going in this lesson we'll be using GitHub. GitHub is very popular and it's easy to use. Okay, everything we are going to be using in this lesson is free, and of course the last thing I'm going to mention that we'll be using in this lesson is our text editor. Okay, the text editor we'll be using is going to be Bracket. Bracket has an inbuilt server. Whatsoever you're doing on Bracket, automatically it changes on your browser. Okay, so we'll be using Google Chrome for our testing. So let's get started. Okay, so what are the importance or the advantages of version control? Okay, both collaboration. Let's say you have a very big project and you want to hire somebody to work with you. The person can remotely work with you on the same code, and both of you can test your code on different versions of the code and deploy it to the server, and of course check the one that is working. So collaboration is one important thing that version control helps to control. Okay, another thing that version control helps to do is it helps you to keep track of the changes you've made to your code. Let's say you made some changes to your code yesterday, and today you made another change, tomorrow you made another change, and you discover that the last change you made maybe did not really reflect what you actually had planned to achieve. So you want to revert back to your original version. Okay, with version control you can keep track of all the changes, okay, in the form of what we call commit hash. Okay, with the commit hash, you can reset your code back to the original or whatsoever version you want to get back. Okay, it helps you to synchronize your code. Okay, like in the case of collaboration, version control can help you to synchronize the code with different persons. It helps for continuous testing and continuous integration. You actually test your code on your local server without affecting the original one until you have pushed your code to the server. Everything will remain the same. All the things you've done on your computer remains on your computer, while the original version of the code still stays there in the server. Okay, so it helps you to revert back to the old versions of your code. So let's get started. The very first thing we're going to do now is to go to our GitHub website. GitHub is a normal website that helps to store or to keep all the versions of codes. Okay, it's free of charge. So what you do, you go to your browser, go to google.com, and type in the search bar, you can just type GitHub. Okay, the very first result. So I already have an account and I'm logged in. So what you do is to register and log in. Okay, so when you check on the GitHub website, on the top right corner you see a plus click on the plus sign and to bring a drop down. What you are going to do, what's happen is all your code is saved in what we call a repository. So you have different repository that have a name, okay, and you click on new repository to create a new repository. So in this place now, what you do is to enter the name of the repository, a name that you want to use as the name to the folder that all your code will be saved in. Okay, so let's call it step by step. Okay, just step by step. You can put a description, make it public or private, whichever way. Then click on create repository. You wait for it to be created. Now it gives you an opportunity to clone your code on your computer, the code that is on the server to be cloned on your computer. So with this URL, you can clone your work that you already have on the server or whichsoever work on your computer. Let's say you have somebody have already written a code and you want to clone the person's work. With the URL, you can clone the work. Okay, now another thing is good for you to set up version control on your computer before you start writing your code. But if you've actually written your code and you did not do that, you can actually also take your code and create a repository and put it in the repository on the server. We will also discuss about that, but in this particular lesson, we are going to start from scratch. Before we start building, before we start developing, before we start writing our code, we set up our version control. Okay, so I'm going to copy this URL. Then I'll go to my terminal, open our Git Bash terminal. Okay, so what you do is type git clone and paste the URL we copied. And this will create a folder. Okay, one in your master you appear to have cloned an empty repository. So what we'll do is cd into that repository, which is step by step. Okay, now we are in that repository. So if I ls list out everything in the repository, you see the repository is actually empty. So now the next thing we're going to do is to create a file. We'll start building our code. Okay, we'll start building. Let's say it's a website. We want to start building our website. So to create a file on our Git Bash terminal, or use the command touch. Then the name of the file I want to create an index.html file. Okay, so if I ls, you see I have my index.html file. So what I will do now, I'll go to my text editor bracket, of course, and open the file we just created. Okay, so this is our text editor now. So we'll locate the folder we want to step by step. So open this. You see our HTML file. You see that is actually empty. Since it's an HTML file, let's add some code to it. So we have our doctype HTML to declare it as HTML5 document. Okay, our HTML to declare the beginning of our code or our document, and the head. So we give it a title. We'll call it my home page. Okay, the next thing is the body. We'll define the body of the document, and let's just put a heading tag h2 and call it welcome. Okay, so if we save this, you see we have 9 lines of code. All right, so what we'll do now, we'll go back to our terminal. We are going to create a stage. We are going to add this file that we've created now to our repository. But before we do that, we will need to add it to a staging environment to inform Git that we already have a file that we want to add to our repository. However, if you check the status of our code now, git status, you see there is an untracked file, which is the HTML file we just created. That means that there is a file that is on our local server that is not on the repository online. So Git helps us to track any changes we make to anything, because everything we are doing now is inside the repository that we've already cloned to our system, to our local computer. Okay, so whatsoever you create on that, inside that repository, Git keeps track of that. It tracks it. It tracks everything. Every little changes you make, it keeps track of it. So it's telling us that we need to synchronize what we have on our local server with what we have on the repository. So to do that, we need to add this. Okay, we are going to add it to the staging environment so that Git can help us to push it to our repository online. So how do we do that? We type git add and the name of the file we want to add, HTML, index.html. So click on enter. Okay, the next thing we'll do now is git commit. We'll commit this to let Git know that we are ready to push it. Okay, so a flag and a message. You write the name of, you put a message to describe the changes you made, so that in case tomorrow you want to come back, the message will help you to remember what you were thinking when you made these changes. Okay, so to do that, we'll just say added an index.html file, like that, and hit enter. Okay, so you see one file changed, 9 insertions, because we have 9 lines of code in our index.html file. So if you go back to our repository online and refresh, you'll see that file has not been added to our repository. Okay, so let's go back to our terminal to now add to our repository. We push it. So the command is git push, and if you're on Windows, you add a flag, then you say origin master. So you wait for everything to be pushed to your repository, and the message will be displayed when it is done. Okay, enumerating object 3 done, counting object 100% done. Okay, so you see all this branch master set up to track remote branch. Okay, so now our code has actually been added to our repository. So if we go back to the repository on GitHub and refresh, you will discover that our index.html file is now added to our repository. So with this now, you have a version of your code online. Okay, and everything is done through the terminal. You don't need to use a file transfer protocol application where let's say you have tons of files and you want to push it. You will be dragging and dropping and waiting for it to be uploaded. Even when you want to deploy your code, if it is a website, you want to deploy it to your host through the terminal, you just push and everything will go one time. You don't need to drag and drop and all that. Okay, so right now we have a version of our code online, and whatsoever changes we make on our code inside the repository, Git helps us to keep track of those changes, and it puts it in the form of hashes. Okay, so we can actually reset back to a particular branch. Okay, so currently if you open this file, you see that the same line of code that we have on our computer, you see we have 9 lines, which is the same thing. So GitHub help us they provide a platform where you can actually edit your code online. Okay, so if you check on the header, the container that has the code, you will see the second to the last icon is something like a pencil that you can use to edit your file, edit your code. So in this case now, you can actually edit this code, and after editing, you scroll down to commit. Commit is just a fancy word that means to save. Okay, so if we add another line to this code, let's say we just add a paragraph and said this is save. Okay, all right, so if we come down here to commit, that means to save. So currently we have 2 versions of our code, one online, and if you go back to our computer, you see that nothing has changed. nothing has changed. So for us to bring the version we have online to our local computer, we use the command git pull. So we'll go back to our terminal and type git pull. With git pull, it brings it clone back whatsoever we have on the local server back to our computer. You can see the git is telling us that there's one insertion, one file changed. So if we go back to our text editor, you will see automatically you see the change as reflected on our local server. So what we have on our local server now is the same thing with what we have online. So there's a synchronization as we use this command git push from our local server to the repository online, git pull from the repository online to the repository on our local server. Okay, so let me just talk about a case whereby you're working on the code with someone and the person has already made changes and pushed to the repository, and you also want to pull back to your computer. The error you encounter, let me just show you how to resolve that. Okay, so we are going to talk about mesh conflicts. Now I have this code here. I want to create another line, but I want to use a break instead of a paragraph, so I'll just say another line. And I will save it. If we go back to a repository and refresh, you see that changes is not made. Whatsoever you do on your computer remains on your computer until you push. So your code is saved online. If you mess around with the code on your computer, it's fine, because you can always download it or clone it back to your computer from online. Okay, so we already have another line. Then I want to edit let's say someone working with you has also made changes to the code, and instead of the person also want to add another line, but the person rather used a paragraph. So now I'll add another paragraph and I'll call it another line. Okay, then I'll commit. Okay, so I have 11 lines here, and on my local server I have 10 lines. Okay, so if I go back to my terminal and I want to pull the code back to the computer, so I'll say I want to pull it, I want to clone it, I want to synchronize it with what I have on my local server. Whatsoever changes you make to your computer, to your code, always make sure you add it to a staging to inform Git that you've made changes and they are ready to be pushed. So if you check, if you git status, you see there are modifications that we've not added. Okay, so we have to add it first. So git add and the name of the file. Now if the files are many, you want to add everything at the same time, and you don't want to be adding one by one file, all you need to do is to, if you're on Windows, you just type git add, then space, you put a period. If you're on Mac, I think you use a star. Okay, so but in this case, since we have just one file and want that file to be tracked, we'll just say git add index.html and add. Then we git commit the message, flag the message, we say made changes, or say added a new line. Okay, so if you want to add these two commands together, instead of you to do git add and git commit, you can, instead of mu here, you just say git commit am. Okay, add and commit. Okay, so either way you're adding and committing. So one file changed, one insertion, one deletion. Okay, so if you git status again now, You see that nothing to commit, working 3 clean. Okay, so if we try to pull now, you see that this has not done anything, or the code on our computer is still different from what we have on the repository. We still have 11 lines, while on our computer we have 10 lines. Okay, so if we go back to our terminal and try to pull what we have there and say git pull, you see we have auto merging index conflict. So we have a merge conflict error. Okay, so to resolve this now you can see that automatically this has been reflected on my text editor, my bracket text editor that I'm using. So let me just explain this error. Everything you see between here, between the less than head, this less than head, and this equal to are your code, the code on your local server. Okay, so everything, all the code you see in between your equal to and the commit string or commit hash, the greater than commit hash, is the code you have, the changes you have online. Okay, so you decide the ones you want to keep. If you want to keep this one, then you have to delete everything from the head to the equal to, then you leave this code. But what we want to do, I want to keep the one on my local server on my computer. So what I will do, I'll delete the head, I'll delete the equal to, I'll also delete this one, and I will delete this commit hash. So, and I will save it. Then I'll go back to my terminal and I will git add again index.html, and I will git commit resolved merged conflict. Okay, so I'll git push all right, so git status, if I go back to my terminal, my repository online, and refresh, you see now that I now have the version that I have on my local server is the same version we have on the repository. That's how you resolve your merged conflicts. Okay, so let me just list out some few commands that are handy now. And the first one is git log. What git log does is shows you a list of all the commits you have made, who made it, and the time that it was made. Okay, so you can see all the commits, the master, and you scroll down. Okay, so this is a list of all the commits you made. All right, so and it gives you, this is the commits hash or the commit string that helps you, that you can use to track your code. So whenever you want to, maybe you want to reset back, you have to make use of this hash, this number, this string. Okay, another command that you'll find very handy is git reset. Say git reset. We have two. We have git reset hard, then the commit number, the particular commit you want to reset to, or you say git reset origin master. If you want to reset back to the original, whether the clone you got from your git, is you use git commit origin master. So this will reset back to the cloned version, the very original version. Okay, so that's that about git reset. Another very powerful command that you find handy also is our git reflog. Git reflog. It gives you references of all the changes to all the changes that you made. Okay, and also the commit hash that you can use. So it keeps tracks of all those changes. You see the very first change we made, which is this, the master, then the commit, the resolve conflicts, the added file, all the changes, fast forward, all the changes we made. The git reflog helps you to keep track of all those changes. Okay, it gives you reference to all those changes. Okay, so basically Git helps us to keep track of our codes, and it helps us to save our code, save works that would cost millions. Okay, so this is how you do, and it is very important you set up your version control before you start coding. But in case you've already did your coding and you want to set up your version control, perhaps you're about to host, you're about to deploy. If it is a website you're about to deploy, you can still set up your version control. So I will discuss that in another video. Thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I will see you guys in another lesson.